Yeah, I believe. I don't think we spoke about Shammai last time, did we?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got up to it's about 11 lines from the top. It's 16A1, the very top of the second column. So we said that so the very top line here is that all of the food um that that whatever money you're going to make, your parnasa is from Rosh Hashanah for a year, but what you spend on Shabbos and Yantif and for your kids to learn Torah, that it doesn't come out of there. So if what you spend, Hashem will funnel that money to you from other sources. That's what we said. And then we mentioned the Shita Mekubetzes mentions that that's true about all mitzvah expenditures. And then we had a quick thing about Rosh Hashanah, which is the month Chodesh Miskasabo that it's covered. So Rashi just says it's at the first of the month. We can't see what day of the month it is because there is no moon to see. And Tosos doesn't like that, and they mentioned that we don't mention in Musaf the Karbanos on Rosh Hashanah, and Rabbeinu Tam disagrees with that. So because he says we do mention the Karbanos, and we actually was more than that. The Re was it the Re? Excuse me, no, Rabbeinu Tam says Shiraga Lavabo. Kesa is a lashon of time. That's the time for it. But Rabbeinu Meshulam says that they didn't bring the goat, the sin offering of Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so that's what we spoke about. Okay, so now Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. This is very interesting. Amr Lav Shimon Hazaken. It was said about Shimon Hazaken. So that's the Beis Shammai was named after this Shammai. Kol Yamav Hayochel Lichlot Shabbos. Every day of the week he ate L'chavot Shabbos. Matzah behemana, if he saw a good animal on Sunday or any other day, Amar Zula Shabbos, he would get it and say it's for Shabbos. Matzah cheres naimena, if he saw one that was even nicer, Maneachas hashniya v'ochel es harishona. He would leave the second one for Shabbos and then he would eat the first one. Meaning, nowadays you can't say, "Oh, that's a nice steak." I mean, we could say, "Oh, that's a nice steak. I'll buy it for Shabbos." In those days, you couldn't. If you found a nice Shabbos on a nice animal on Sunday, you couldn't shecht it right away. You'd shecht it erev Shabbos. So if he found a better animal, then he'd buy the other animal. So then he would check the first animal. I don't know why he didn't sell it, but well, no, because it says that if he saw a better animal, he would leave the second one for Shabbos and he would eat the first one. So the one that he originally bought for Shabbos, he ate earlier in the week. But Hillel Zaken had a different midah, a different measure, a different attitude. Shekal Masav l'shem Shemayim. So this literally means all of his deeds were for the sake of heaven. Shnema Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Blesses Hashem every day. So obviously Shammai was also Kol Masav l'shem Shemayim, but Hillel's attitude, as Rashi says, he was sure that Hashem that he would be able to find a nice animal for Shabbos later in the week. It's almost so. It's not that Shammai. I don't think it's that Shammai thought that he wouldn't get a better animal during the week. But we could explain this with the Ramban. The Ramban says by Hachodesh, and he also said it in Yisro on Zachar Som Shabbos Akacho. So the mitzvah of Zachar Som Shabbos Akacho, remember the Shabbos day, that refers to the positive commandments of Shabbos. Shamor, which was said at the same time by Hashem, and it's in the Veschanan Luchos, that refers to the negative mitzvahs. So the Gemara in what in Psachim says is in Psachim or is in Shabbos. I think it's in Psachim that Zachar Sama Shabbos Lekacho is to make Kiddush and also Havdalah to make remember Shabbos through Kiddush. And so the Ramban goes further and says, in regard to the months of the year, he says Chodesh is Alacham, we count to Nisan, the first month, the second month, the third month. So whenever we mention what month it is, we refer, it's automatically referring to Nisan. And by referring to Nisan, remembering the miracles that Hashem did for us in Nisan to redeem us from Mitzrayim. So the Ramban also says when we say we count all of our days are counted to Shabbos, the first towards Shabbos, the second towards Shabbos. It's a little different. The months are from Nisan, but the days of the week are towards Shabbos. So every time we're mentioning what day is it, we're mentioning we're Shabbos. By mentioning Shabbos, remembering Hashem created the world and rested on the seventh day, and that's why we have Shabbos. So it's a built-in Zechira. So the Ramban says that Shammai's practice here was based on everything revolved around Shabbos. So all day long was Shabbos, 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 a week of Shabbos, almost. Not as a week of Shabbos, but he was always thinking about Shabbos. Not that Hillel was ignoring Shabbos, but it wasn't his number one focus. I mean, during the earlier in the week, he wasn't preparing for Shabbos on Sunday and Monday necessarily. So that's one thing. Then I thought to say, and I mentioned earlier, well, now it's probably 3 months ago already, that there is an opinion. I'm not exactly sure what it's based on. If it's based on Kabbalah or Hasidus, or that in Mashiach time we're going to pass like Beis Shammai, which I mentioned. I have a lot of that. I have trouble that would be true because halacha doesn't change this or that. But let's assume that there's truth to that. So Shabbos is a Me'ein Olam Haba. It's a miniature Olam Haba. And Olam Haba, there's two Olam Habas. One Olam Haba is the Olam Neshamos, where the souls go when someone passes away, the soul leaves the body. But then Olam Haba also refers to the time of Mashiach. So Shabbos is a Me'ein Olam Haba in regard to the times of Mashiach. So Shammai was always focused on that because he's focused on Yemos Mashiach. And nowadays, with Mashiach not here yet, so he's focusing toward Shabbos. So it's a certain nice that if along those lines, you can understand why Shammai was always looking towards Shabbos. Okay, let's continue. But this is a famous Gemara about Shammai. And the Ramban mentions it in the Ramban that I just mentioned, that everything is Shabbos. So Shammai was also thinking about Shabbos. Tanin Amihachi, we have another brisa like this. Beis Shammai Omrim Mechad Shevicha L'Shabsech. From the first day of the week, already thinking about your Shabbos, or get ready for Shabbos. Beitza Omrim Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Beitza says, "Blesses Hashem every day." So when Shabbos is getting closer, then we prepare for Shabbos. You don't have to start preparing for Shabbos from Sunday. Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Chamas in the name of Rabbi Chanina, the son of Rabbi Chanina said, if you give someone a gift, you don't have to tell them about it. So I guess if you leave something by his door, you don't have to leave a card that says it's from you. Ushanemar, as the pasuk says, Moshe Yada ki karan or panav. Moshe didn't, when he came down from the mountain, he didn't know that his face was glowing with light. So Hashem gave him this gift that his face was glowing with light, but he didn't tell Moshe about it. They didn't have any mirrors in Shemayim. So we see that you don't have to tell someone that you give him a gift. Meisave, but they asked him, Chanina, Ladas ki ani Hashem ekadishchem. The pasuk says to know that I am Hashem who sanctifies you. That's in Kisisa. So we'll read it in a week and a half. The pasuk says, "And now speak to Bnei Israel, saying, Ach, however, as Shab society tishmoru, guard my Shabbos, kiyosi b'ni u'v'nechem l'dorosechem." It's a sign between me and between you for your generations, l'dorosechem l'daskei Hashem Hashem, to know that I'm Hashem who makes you holy, who sanctifies you. So we mentioned this a few weeks ago when we spoke talking about tefillin. That tefillin is an os, and Shabbos is an os. Bris Milah is also an os. We spoke about the according to Tosos, there's no iser to wear tefillin on Shabbos, but it seems to other Rishonim, well, I don't know, and other Rishonim, the way the Shulchan Aruch Paskin is based on the Zohar, it's aser. So we spoke about the os. So this pasuk that is quoting here is actually the pasuk that calls Shabbos an os in Parshas Ki Sisa. So to know that I'm Hashem who sanctified you, was obviously by giving us Shabbos. So Amar La Kodesh Baruch Hu Moshe. With this pasuk, Hashem was telling Moshe, Matan Tova Yesh Bebeis Ganazai. I have a great present in my storage house. B'Shabbos Shema, and its name is Shabbos. V'ani mevakesh litna l'Yisrael. I want to give it to Yisrael. Lech v'odia losam. Go and inform them. Mikan Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, and from this pasuk, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, or from this source, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, "Hanosein pasletino tzarich l'dila imo." If you give bread to a kid, you have to tell his mother, or a lollipop. So if you get from this, it seems if you give someone a gift, you have to let them know about it. From Hanosein pasletino, you have to tell its mother. So Rashi says you make some type of marking on the kid that if you would have eaten it before he gets back to his mother, she will see that there's a mark on him, and she'll say, "Who put this mark on you?" And she'll say, "Shmiro." Oh, and he also gave me a cookie. Because you tell the kid, tell your parents this, they're not going to do it. So they, lahavdil, they'll take a marker and put a mark. And they didn't have markers back then. And the mother says, "Why do you have that mark on your hand?" Say, "Oh, Shmuel did that to me." So he said, "Why did Shmuel do it to you?" "Oh, he gave me a cookie." In the beginning of the second paragraph of Ksuvos, I'm listening to Rav Aaron right now, that one of the simanim that they say that a woman got married when she was a basula, and therefore she has a bigger ksuva, is that they gave out candies, or in those days it was toasted kernels of wheat or whatever, but that was candy in those days to the kids. So he said, for the other simanim, the people could have been so involved in the wedding they would have forgotten. But the kids would have kept nagging everyone. He didn't use that word, but the kids would kept reminding, "Are we going to get the candy yet? Are we going to get the candy yet?" So there was no way that it would be forgotten, because the kids wouldn't let it be forgotten if it was a basula getting married. So I'm just saying that about the kids getting candy. So here, if you give something to the kid, you have to make you have to make sure that the parent knows that you gave something to them. So that seems to be that a source that you have to give. If you give a gift, you have to inform them. So Lokash, it's not a contradiction. When you give a gift that you can leave, you don't have to leave a card. That's if it's eventually going to come out that it came from you. But when the kid eats it all up right away, it's never gonna. It's not going to get revealed. So you have to make sure it gets revealed. So Shabbos, it has to be known that Hashem gave us Shabbos. So Moshe said, so Rashi says that when Moshe's face lit up, Hashem didn't have to tell it, because other people say, "Moshe, your face is lit up." Then he realized Hashem must have given me some gift that my face is glowing now. Shabbos nami matanda davidali gluye. But why did Hashem have to tell Moshe, "I'm going to give you the Bnei Yisrael this gift of Shabbos"? Shabbos is going to eventually, people are going to know that we have Shabbos. If we have Shabbos, we have to know about it. It's not like we keep Shabbos without knowing about it. So we're going to know that there is Shabbos, so we must have gotten it from Hashem. So the Gemara says, Matan Schar La Vida Ligluye. Okay, so Shabbos we would not have known about the reward for Shabbos. So Hashem was telling Moshe that there's going to be a big reward for giving Shabbos, for keeping Shabbos. So we're going to come back to this in a few moments. Amar the Bryce that we just learned, it said, Mikan Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Hanosim Pasatino Tzorch L'Diel Imo. From here, Rabbi Gamliel said, if someone gives bread or a cookie, a lollipop, or as Floyd would say, a sucker. People from the over a certain age always call it suckers. You have to tell the mother. My avidle. So what do you do to the kid so that the mother will realize? What mark are you doing to him? So shayafle mishcha umali le kochla. Put oil on him or put some like makeup around him so he sees. But nowadays that we're worried about sorcery, what can you do? Because if the kid would come home being robbed or with makeup on, we see that maybe a shade did it, or maybe there was magic done to him. So Amra Papa Shaifle may also hamin. You rub him with some of the food that you gave him, so they'll know. You put the crumbs in his hair, or whatever, so they'll say, "Why are the crumbs in your hair?" Oh, Shmuel did that. Oh, he gave. Yeah, right. So I don't know. From things that I heard from Ramosha, I would think that in the case of Shafim here, it would just be certain types of people. So this I didn't hear him put it this way, but let's say that there might be people who are trying to be subversive, and so they're trying to or lahavdil, let's say missionaries. The missionary, or nowadays we know from other things, lo aleinu, with grooming and stuff. So the kshafim thing could be that we want to make sure that, I mean, so meaning even though kshafim means witchcraft or magic, things like that, but it could be, how do you know it's not someone trying to do bad things to your kid, or being even or let's say even a missionary. So you're trying to make a relationship with the kid because you're gonna later, try to shmad the kid, Pastor Shalom. So you can't put on the makeup or this. So it's not literally that we think that a demon put the paint on, even though there are things like that. So smear the food on it. I don't know. It's okay. I'm Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Mishum Rechai. Rabbi Yochanan is in the name of Rabbi Shem Bar Yochai. All the mitzvahs that Hashem gave to Israel, He gave them publicly. Except for Shabbos that He gave them privately. Well, there's more than one pasuk about Shabbos being an os. It's also in Kisisa. Two psukim next to each other. So Baini, between me and between Bnei Yisrael. But if so, then the non-Jew should not be punished for refusing to accept the Torah. So Rashi mentions, we know that there's a medrash that Hashem offered the Torah to the other nations and they all rejected it. So Rashi says that we find, and it is a Gemara in the beginning of Avodah Zarah, that Hashem is eventually going to punish them for not accepting the Torah and the mitzvos. And the pasuk is from the beginning of Vizos HaBracha. V'zarach Misir Lama Fiyam Ehar Paron. So if Shabbos was something that was given privately, so they wouldn't have known about Shabbos, so they shouldn't be punished about not accepting Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Shabbos Odinu Odinu. No, Hashem did inform them about Shabbos. Matan Tzchar Lo Odinu. He didn't tell them about the reward for Shabbos. So v'iboy semo, or you could say matan tzkarnami odinhu. He did tell him about the reward, but Neshama Yeseira lo odinhu. He didn't tell him about the Neshama Yeseira. The Amar Bishul Lakish, because Reish Lakish said Neshama Yeseira nasan Hakadosh Baruch Hu ba'adam be'erev Shabbos. Hashem gives a Neshama Yeseira, an extra soul in a person on erev Shabbos. Well, Motzei Shabbos no lenoso himena, and after Shabbos he takes it away. Shnamar the Pasuk says Shabbos vayinafash, that on the seventh day we Shabbos, vayinafash, and we were rested. Kevan sheshavas vay of the nefesh. So vayinafash, the vav and the yud is a vayinafash is a contraction. The vay is like oy nefesh. So after Shabbos is over, I lost this soul that I had. Okay, so what's this Neshama Yeseira? So Rashi says it's a rochav lev, a wider heart for rest and for simcha, and being open for a lot of stuff, and you're able to eat and drink, and you don't get too disgusted from eating so much on Shabbos. So, according to this Rashi, and according to, it seems there's a Medrash Hagadol or something in Parshas Bereishis. Rav Leo Greenswag in his Sefer talks about in Shabbos Bereishis in the context of, believe it or not, Sheva Brachos. Because the Gemara in Ksuvos and Daf Zayin or so, or Ches, when it talks about Sheva Brachos, says that we only say all of the Sheva Brachos, but let's assume that it's not that it's a first marriage for at least one of them, so we have Sheva Brachos for all 7 days. But you need a panach hadashos. You need a new face that the simcha is enhanced by this person now participating in the simcha. The Gemara says Shabbos itself is a panach hadashos. So some explain that the Neshama Yeseira that we have on Shabbos is the panach hadashos. It's the same person, and it's not that Shabbos itself, but Shabbos there's more to us to love. So each of us who are around are not the same that we were before. We're more on Shabbos, so therefore we are Panim Chadashos. So therefore we're able to eat more on Shabbos. It must be it should be noted though, the Abu Dram, the student of the Rosh, a lot of what we have on the Siddur is from him. He wrote a very important commentary on the Siddur and on Brachos. He says, and this is clearly, we can tell he was a Sephardi, because Ashkenazim certainly it's a joke for Ashkenazim, that he says the reason we have a mitzvah of Shalosh Shudas is to remind us not to eat too much at lunch on Shabbos, because if knowing that we have to eat Shalosh Shudas, it's you're all laughing because we're Litvaks here, we're Ashkenazim. See, the Hasidim lose it too, right. Herbie Olav Shalom used to have what, 1 carrot or 2 carrots? That was the Shalosh Shudas. But the Abu Dram says we have a mitzvah of Shalosh Shudas to remind us not to eat too much. So I don't know what he must have a different shot in Neshama Yeseira. So what is the Neshama Yeseira? Some say, and yeah, I don't know. I know that some Hasidic groups, Dafka, don't eat Shalosh Shudas. Right, they certainly don't eat. Right, they don't. I don't know why. It's a mitzvah, but I mean, I know partially why. When you start davening late, there's not so much time later in the day. But I was out of town at a Lubavitch shul, and everyone who was eating Shalosh Shudas at the shul was not a Lubavitcher. The Lubavitchers were sitting around, may have been sitting around, walking around. They didn't eat. Everyone who was eating was not a Lubavitcher. And the Shalosh Shudas at this Lubavitch shul. So, according to some sources, the Neshama Yeseira is the souls of Rishaim who are being punished in Gehenna. They get a respite on Shabbos from Gehenna. So those Neshamos are the Neshama Yeseiras. I don't know if they come into us, whatever. So I guess if you do that, I guess there's some, I don't know if there's a temporary Gilgal for Shabbos. I don't know. But that's according to some, that's Neshama Yeseira. Rav Aaron said, I heard it from other people. I don't remember if I asked Ramosh about it once or not, but he says that it's not an extra soul, but it's a super. It's almost like it's a regular neshama. It becomes a super soul, which makes more sense. Fits in well with what Rashi says here. That the same soul we have during the week is able to do more on Shabbos, and we know I've quoted many times, and God willing, I'll continue to quote many times. Rabbi Eugene's opinion that on Shabbos, certain halachos about that that someone could be relied on, even though they may not take off Meiser during the week. If on Shabbos they tell you they took off Meiser, you can believe them because of Shabbos you're not going to lie. So Shabbos lifts up our spiritual level of everyone. And then Rabbi Eugene mentioned in his Hakdama there that on Shabbos we are even able to elevate the physical acts into a spiritual act. That we elevate the physical act of eating into the spiritual act. Now, an improper way of doing that is to force yourself to eat shalashudas. It is lishma to an extent. I mean, it is a lot lishma. I'm eating only because it's a mitzvah. But at the same time, to stuff yourself isn't the great mitzvah. But that's not what he meant. So now you know why they're so focused on Malav Malka, because they skip shalashudas. Oh, so we said Shavas Vayinafash, that Vayinafash says Voy of the Nefesh, Oi, we lost our soul. So that's the Neshama is going back to Gehenna, now that Shabbos is over. And that's a reason why, and I think we mentioned this when we learned our Psachim, why we use Besamim at Havdalah. With the soul leaving us, we're weak, so we need the Besamim. Lahavdil, certain people who have thin metal things under their feet, they take the smelling salts. So because we're weak, because of the Neshama Yeseira leaving us, according to that opinion, that it's whether it's the Neshama's going back to Gehenna or even our souls reverting back to their normal size, so it weakens us. We have besamim, and then there is I think it has to do with Gehenna. I don't remember. It's brought down. Mishnah Berurah mentions it, not to drink water bein hashmashos when Shabbos is leaving, because it's something bad for the neshamas who are leaving, whatever. And then there's a different thing. Someone told me once. They said, "Oh, that has to be the reason." He said, "Yeah, that's the reason." When I was much younger, that the Kaddish at the end of Marav, the Kaddish Yasom at the end of Marav on Friday on Motzei Shabbos, you're supposed to say slow because you're dragging it out to let the neshamas hang on a few more moments. That's also mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Mishnah Berurah by Echos Motzei Shabbos. I don't know. My father, for some reason, and I don't know the source, but it might be related. If someone was having yorts like that week, he would have them daven. He has them daven Marav. I don't know if it's related, even though they don't have the yortzeit yet.
So that year I was over there.
Okay. So that's a little bit about the Neshama Yeseira. Okay, 16A3. So back to Eruv Tavshillin. Oh, one thing I'm not sure about. Well, according to the Gemara, it doesn't seem that the Neshama Yeseira is a reward for Shabbos. It happens to be a fact of life of Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Yod Ches, says that that there was families in Yerushalayim got destroyed, but certain families didn't get destroyed. And why didn't they get destroyed? Because they always went all out for Shabbos. So I think the Gemara says they get a nachla beli sof or something, an inheritance without an end. So for now, I don't think that means you get the $1,000 charcuterie board. Other people have mentioned in the past couple months this correctly against this thing called Toamel. People, they smoke these expensive cigars, and they get the more expensive scotches than they drink on Shabbos. They drink it before Shabbos starts, and they eat this fancy food. They do this thing, and they're not so hungry for Shabbos either. It's it's good to extend Shabbos, but not that way. That's not from the Kedusha of Shabbos. So how do you make an Eruv Tavshillin? You cook something before Yantif starts. Amar Abaye says, Loshano Elat Tavshil. That's only talking about you have to cook a food before Shabbos. Aval pas lo. But you can't use bread. Maishna pastalo. Why? And now we do use bread, but well, the Gemara we're not done with the sugya yet. But so Maishna pastalo. Why don't we use bread for an erev tavshilin? Now we use both. We need a cooked food and bread. Abaye held that the erev tavshilin was only cooked food. Bread didn't count. Maishna pastalo. Why is bread different than food that it doesn't count for an erev tavshilin? If it's because you need something that goes with it, accompanies the bread. In those days, if you ate meat, you put the meat on the bread and you ate it. Not that they ate sandwiches, but everything was as accompaniment to the bread. Upaslo malafta, and bread doesn't go with bread. A teacher when I was in high school said there was a certain guy who was there a few years before used to eat a bread sandwich. I'm not exactly sure what a bread sandwich meant. 3 pieces of bread, I don't know, but he said he ate a bread sandwich. Daisa is some type of porridge, whether it's oatmeal or farina, something like that. It's some type of grain porridge. That doesn't go with bread. You don't eat that with bread. The Reb Zera, and Reb Zera said, Hani bavloi tipshoy da'achlu nama benama. Those bavloim are foolish because Reb Zera, we learned at the end of Ksuvos, Reb Zera fasted to forget the Torah of Bavel before he went to Eretz Yisrael. So he was an ex-Bavli who went to Eretz Yisrael, and he would say the Bavliim are so foolish that they eat bread with bread. Well, when I was in high school, from high school, we ate a bread sandwich. Well, the Amrav Nechumi Bar Zachari Mishmei Dabai, and Rav Nechumi Bar Zachari said the name of Abai. What did he mean? Ma'arvin Bedaisa. That you could, and they said in the name of Abai that you're able to use this porridge as your Eruv Tavshillin food, and that certainly doesn't go with bread. So, what's the reason that Abai says not to use that you can't use bread for Eruv Tavshillin? Alamidi dol shchiach be'inan. You need something that is unusual for your Eruv Tavshillin. Upash shchicha v'dais lo shchicha. Bread is a regular thing, so if you just see bread around, you're not going to remember that you made it for Shabbos, and that's why. And it's starting the cooking process for Shabbos before Yontif. It will let you continue to cook for Shabbos over Yontif. But if you make this porridge, that's unusual enough. It doesn't have to be super unusual. Something you make twice a year, but it's bread is the staple of the diet. So you have to make something besides that in order to have the Eruv Tavshillin. Ikda Amri. So there's a different version of what happened. Amr Abai said, Lo shanu ela tavshil. Ava paslo. So when you have to have a cooked food as the Eruv Tavshillin and not bread. My time, what's the reason? And if you say because you need something that's not usual, bread is usual. So meaning upashchicha, but bread is kamen b'hadaisi lo shchicha. Porridge is not commonly eaten. It's not eaten every day. It's not so uncommon, but it's not so common. Rabbi Nechumi Bar Zachari Mishmei Abaye. Rabbi Nechumi Bar Zachari in the name of Abaye said, "Ein ma'arvin b'daisa." You're not allowed to make an Eruv Tavshillin with porridge. So this version says that Abaye said you're not allowed to use porridge as the Eruv Tavshillin food. Elamidi dimlafes ba'ina. No, you need something that will go with the bread. Upaslo malafta. Bread doesn't go with bread. B'dais anami lamalafta. And porridge also isn't eaten with bread. Reb Zera says, Hani bavloi tipshay da'afli nama banama. These Babylonians are foolish that they eat bread with bread. They eat a starch with a starch. Tani Reb Chia taught Adashim Shebishul Kedera Eruv Tavshillin. So I guess in those days they it was not really possible to clean pots the way we have. So if they had some lentils, you cooked lentils in a pot, you overcooked it a little bit, so they got stuck at the bottom of the pot and they didn't have steel wool. So those leftover lentils you can use as your cooked food for your Eruv Tavshillin. The honey mili de isbu kazayas, as long as there's at least a kazayas of them. So at last 2 weeks ago, last year, we with the Gemara had a discussion. We wanted to say that because even though the Mishnah says you just need anything, kol shehu, we said if it got lost or eaten up, you can't use it as your Eruv Tavshillin anymore. If any of it is left over, then you still have your Eruv Tavshillin. So even though kol shehu sounded like it meant any amount, we mentioned last time that the Gemara mentioned that it means you need a kazayas. So if you burnt a little bit too many, I mean, if you're completely burnt, then it's not really considered lentils anymore. But they were sticking them out of the pot, so instead of taking it out, you're gonna leave them in the pot, and that's gonna be your Eruv Tavshillin food. So as long as there's a kazayas to them, it's okay. This was next is even a little crazier, I think. I'm Rabbi Yitzchak Braid Rabbi Yehuda Shamnunish Al Gabi Hasakin Goro. If there's fatty parts from something that you cook that you cut with a knife and it's on the knife, you can scrape it off the knife. The Samachalav Mishum Eruv Tavshillin, and that which came from, I guess, cooked meat or whatever, that fat can be your Eruv Tavshillin food. And maybe something for us will be a little bit more relevant. Well, maybe for them it wasn't relevant to make the chicken soup. So when it cools, but now we put it in the fridge, it cools, and that they're those times in that fridge. So I don't know if they actually got the fat to be a layer of hard fat on the top of the soup.
Yeah.
What? Right, because when it's cold, right, it congeals. Yeah. The Somach Lemishmer Tavshillin v'Hani Mili Disbu Kazayas, as long as there is a Kazayas. Ravasi Amarav. Ravasi said the name of Rav. Dagim Hitana Meluchim, small salted fish. Ein Bahem Yishum. Oh, Rashi points out that when you scrape off the knife, you have to scrape it off before Yantav starts. Because otherwise, it's not your Eruv Tavshillin, it has to be from before Yantav. Okay, so yes, so you're not far off. You're not far off, right? So small salted fish, Ein Bahem Yishum Bishul Nachrim. It might be sushi, it might be herring. So we're gonna see. So here's what Rashi says. So Rashi says the Chachamim were gozer that you can't eat food that was cooked by a non-Jew, because if they cook for you, you might become friendly with them, and you're going to marry your daughter off to his son. So it's a way to prevent intermarriage. But if something would be eaten raw, the fact that a goy cooks it isn't a problem. You could have it from a goy. Since it could be eaten raw, the fact that they cooked it is not too important. And now these fish are eaten without being cooked, just they get salted. So I don't know if cold smoked is considered. It's certainly not cooking with heat. What? But there's a cold smoke and there's a hot smoke. So the hot smoke would probably be considered cooking, but the cold smoke not necessarily. But there's if something is called kavush is something that would be like pickled. So pickled halachically is a form of cooking. In regard to Shabbos, I don't think you'd be. It's probably not there. It wouldn't be derech bishul, but let's say for basar b'chalav, it's. I don't remember what they're saying. Simon Peizayin about basar b'chalav. If it may not be midiraisa, I don't remember. But when you pickle things, they impart taste to each other, so it's a form of cooking. Oh, so just very briefly, it's not our topic, but it's an important halachic topic. Um, some say that if it's a commercial enterprise, the fact that a goy cooks it isn't isn't such a risk because when it's talking about a goy cooking, you're going to become friendly. That's because you're going into his house or whatever is in, and so there's a personal, face-to-face interactions coming with. If it's a whole industrial thing, the fact that a goy cooks it, you don't even come in contact with the goy. So that's a possible heter in some situations. Um, Sfardim, Ashkenazim have a lot more leniencies on this than Sfardim do. It seems based on the way things were done and the need of they would starve otherwise. Basically, there's a Ashkenazic heter would be if a Jew lights the pilot light. So nowadays, less and less things have a pilot light, so it's a little bit of a problem. But Ashkenaz, um, so if and we could say that any part of the cooking process was done by a Jew, Ashkenazim are makel, and they call that it was that a Jew is involved in the cooking process. So, 100 years ago, well, maybe a little bit more than 100 years ago, but still, if it was a coal burning or a wood burning fire, some Jews would put a toothpick in or light a cigarette or whatever from it. So therefore, adding a little bit of fire to it to make it that they made the fire hotter. When I was in high school, a certain institution, which I won't mention, they realized that they didn't have Jews that at a certain time of day when certain products were being uh, cooked or baked, whatever the process is. I'm being intentionally nebulous over here. So one boy from the yeshiva became the guy. He would go over there. Basically, he opened up the door and then closed it because it would cool off a little bit. And then closing the door, it was warming it up. So he increased the heat. So that would make it that it was cooked by a Jew. And um, and for things without a pilot light, if it's they would have a Jew turn on the fire. The Svardim hold that no, the Jew had to play a significant role in the cooking process. So just turning on the fire wouldn't be enough for Svardi if you for Bishul Yisrael for Svardi. So those are just some very very basic principles of. Oh, and then we're going to mention another one. I think we're going to mention on the next Amud. So yeah, there's a Tosos in the next Amud. So we're going to mention something else in a few more minutes. Another possible heter for certain things. I'll just tell one story. Uh, when FDR was president, I don't remember who it was, but there was some state dinner that he had. So the New York Times wrote the menu of what they served, and they served salmon. So Ravaran said from there that salmon. Oh, so another thing is that if something is important enough that kings would eat it, then this halacha applies. If it was something that's insignificant that a king wouldn't eat it, a non-Jew could cook it. It's not a problem. But if it's ola shulchan malachim, it's a problem. So he served salmon. So Ravaran said from there we see salmon is ola shulchan malachim. So and the laws of Bishul Akum, the restrictions of Bishul Akum would apply to it. Now, Lahavda, when there was about 7 or 8 years ago during a different government shutdown in Trump's first term, he was having the college football champions, and I never saw they had all this stuff from McDonald's, and they put it so nicely on the tables. So some of the according to Ravaran to say there, you'd have to say that all these McDonald's was all al shulchan alachim because the king served it. I don't know.
No.
Those are the anti-Trump people, though. Oh.
Wasn't there, he's mentioned, six foot, and
I mean, nowadays, I mean, I think that everyone needs everything at some point, right? It's very difficult to imagine a food that a king or president wouldn't eat. I mean, they may not like something, but there's nothing to say that's so unimportant. We're not going to use it. Even ramen noodles in economics, ramen noodles we say for an inferior good. Most goods, when your income goes up, you're going to use most of them. You're going to have more of it. Ramen noodles is one of the examples you use for an inferior good. When your income goes up, you use less of it. Public transportation is possibly an inferior good, but like ramen, when I took economics the first time, my professor was still a youngish guy, so he probably was still eating the ramen noodles. He would mention ramen noodles all the time as an inferior good. But now the fancy menus have you crush up some ramen, you put on top of salads for crunch, and it makes it fancier. Even the fancy Jewish cookbooks, they would even eat it at a toamah before Shabbos. They take low quality food and they make it into a fancy thing now. Okay. Well, he farmed the peanuts.
see, I mean, they were at the team, they were following the crew.
Right. Just I've had something else these shiurim from Ravarn that I listened to last week, and we kind of discussed it a while ago, quite a while ago in Brachos about hopping over the kvarim of the non-Jews when the king was coming. Could a Kohen hop over it? It's a very strange Tosfos that we had over there. But Ravarn mentioned that among non-Jews we don't have a melech, but we have a thing of malchus. So even if this person isn't a king, but he represents a malchus, and therefore you need respect. And he said even the king Achav was a big Russia, but he was the king of the 10 tribes. He wasn't from Malchus Beis David, and he wasn't appointed by a Navi. He wasn't. So he said he was only like the prime minister, but still, when Hashem told Elio to go there, he told Elio, you have to go like a mensch. You have to give respect. So even though he didn't necessarily have a din melech, but he was Malchus. Ravarn also mentioned in a different thing that among the non-Jews there isn't a navi from the non-Jews, but there is nevuah among non-Jews, but not wouldn't have an individual wouldn't have the status of navi, but he has, and he spoke about Balak in context, and he has it in the Sefer, and actually Rav Yosef may have combined those two things. I'm trying to remember. It was sure more than 25 years ago, but Clinton was president at the time, and he mentioned something towards the end of the share. If someone would go to Hanasi Clinton, so even the non-Jewish rulers aren't a melech, even if their title is king. Well, Purim is coming up. I can't. I saw a picture on the internet yesterday that former Prince Harry and his wife were at the NBA All-Star game. Then there's a picture of them sitting next to Queen Latifah. So the prince was sitting next to a queen. It was not a queen. That's her name. It was just hilarious. With Purim coming up, I have to mention it. It's different Betel in the share, but it was so funny with Purim coming up. I couldn't resist it. But I don't know if there's a similarity that it's Xeris HaKasov. We're learning out from Xeris HaKasov. So it's probably not similar. It just happens to be they made a similar drasha that there's no Navi, but there's Nevuah, there's no Melech, but there's Malchus. And so yeah, well, it doesn't matter. The McDonald's isn't kosher anyway, so I don't know if it's something that's not kosher, would it how that would affect the halachas of Bishul Akum or not. I haven't been there in a very long time. At one time, there was one that was Mahadran in, I think there was one Mahadran one in Mivaseret, and then it wasn't there anymore. Right, because it's not Mahadran anymore. So there might be plain Rabbanut McDonald's, But I don't know if that would go. But that's something. But I don't know if that would be. But I don't know any Malach would use that McDonald's on there. I'm Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, Nachri, if a non-Jew roasted these fish that didn't need to be cooked, but if they were roasted even by a non-Jew, you can rely on them as your Eruv Tavshillin food. So you had these fish that are eaten raw. They salt them, they're eaten raw. A goy happened to roast them. You bought them from the goy, or you had the goy roasted for you. You can use those fish as Eruv Tavshillin. So it didn't even need to be cooked, but once it was cooked, you could use it as Eruv Tavshillin. The Abdina Nachri Kasa the hardness also. But if the goy made them into Kasa the hardness the harsana, so Rashi, the Arch Girl says that that's a fish hash. So meaning you fried them, you put some extra fat and flour in them, then you're not allowed to, because that's a level of cooking that the goy is not allowed to do. You, a Jew, would need to participate in the cooking process for it to be mutter to eat. Rashi says flour is not eaten raw, so therefore, because by frying it, you're elevating the raw flour into something edible, so now it had to be cooked by a Jew. The fish part, I guess, the fish that you use for the Kasa de Harsana were these fish that could have been eaten raw, but once you're making it into the fried thing and you're adding flour, then that elevates the whole thing, and it's considered it's something that needs to be cooked now. So once it needs to be cooked, it needs to be cooked by a Jew. Question? Pshita, of course, this is something that isn't able to be eaten raw, so of course the laws of Bishul Akum would apply. So Gemara says, "Mao the same I would have thought." As we turn to says Zayin and base, Harsana Iker, it's the fish and the fish guts. And Rashi says it seems to be fish guts. The article translates fish fat is the main part of the dish. Kamash Malan Kimcha Iker. So he's teaching us that the flour is the main part of the dish, and therefore Bishul Akum applies. So what also would seem to apply according to this is that Kasa de Harsana you'd make a Mizonos on. Now I think we mentioned this within the last few months, that some people I think forget about this. Some of the things that they did in time of the Gemara, culturally and societally, is different nowadays. So in that time, if that was the Iker, that may not be the same. It's not that the Torah changes; that's the way we do things and why we do things changes, and that might affect what's the Iker and what's the Tafa. The example that I gave was the CRC says that that the rice for let me try to say this over right. Well, I think they say that the bracha on sushi is hadama because in Japan, the main part, they're not eating it for the fish, they're eating it for the rice. But they don't eat the rice by itself, so they put a piece of fish in it. But I don't think if you would give someone just a ball of rice here, no one would eat it. They're only eating the sushi because of the fish that's in it. That's what I do. So I don't know that the way they do it in Japan, and that's a source for it, doesn't necessarily mean that that's how we do it here. So I'm not sure that I agree with that, and I think we spoke about it in the last few months here in the Gemara Beitza share. Sound familiar to anyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Amar Baba Eruv Tavshillin Shichin Kizayis. Eruv Tavshillin requires a Kizayis amount of food. Yibayil, who they ask, Kizayis echad lekulan or dilma Kizayis echad be'echad. Do you need one kizayis for each person you're planning on cooking for? Excuse me, is one kizayis good for everyone, or do you need a kizayis for everyone who you assume is going to be eating with you? Tashma, we learned in the Brisa, the Rabba Abba Amarav, Rav Abbas in the name of Rav. Eruv Tavshillin tzrichin kizayis bein la'achad bein lameya. Eruv Tavshillin needs a kizayis, whether it's for one person, whether you're cooking for 100. And we had a similar phrase, not exactly in ksuvos. We said nir la'achad nir lameya. One candle could light up for one person, it could light up for 100 people. So the Eruv Tavshillin could work even if you're making for a whole institution. Tana, we learned in the Mishnah. Oh, so I thought we mentioned last time that the Gemara is here. I prepared it for this week, or actually for last week. So here I said that the Mishnah said that it makes it sound like you only have, if as long as any of the Eruv Tavshillin remains, you could cook on it. It sounds like it's like kizayis. The Gemara's maskana, the conclusion of the Gemara is you need to have a kizayis. So the Gemara is here. We didn't do it together yet. We'll do it together now, Gadol. So now we learned in our Mishnah, Ochlo sha'avad, if the Eruv Tavshillin got eaten up or you lost it, lo yivaj lo betchila, you're not allowed to cook it lechatchila because you don't have your Eruv Tavshillin anymore. Shir mimenu kolshu, but if any of it remains, somech lov l'Shabbos, you can rely on that and cook for Shabbos on Yantif on Erev Shabbos. So my call, Shahu, Lav Agav the Lake Kazayas, as any amount remains, doesn't that mean even if it's less than a Kazayas? So the Gemara says low, the East Bay Kazayas. So it means when you have at least the Kazayas remaining. So if you made a big thing and you ate half of it, but you still have more than Kazayas, you still have your Erev Tavshillin food and you can keep cooking on that for Shabbos. Tashma, we learned in the Braisa. Tavshil Zatzli, the cooked food for Erev Tavshillin is allowed to be something that's roasted. When we say cooked in halacha, we usually mean cooked in water. It doesn't have to be completely boiled, but it's not a dry cooking. Even if it's pickled or cooked, very shaluk is cooked to a very, very long time, or mevoshel or regular cooked, and some type of fish that you put hot water in Erev Yantiv. So our school translated Spanish mackerel. I don't know where they get that from. They say they get it from the Aruch says that. So Rashi says it's a salted fish and it's soft and you eat it raw. However, you pour hot water on it and that's cooking. So you don't actually have to cook it. You just pour hot water on it and that's the cooking process. So because that's the cooking process of this fish, even similar to what we saw in the last line or second to last line on the previous Amud, the salted fish that could be eaten raw, but if someone roasted it, you could use that as your food for Eruv Tavshillin. So here too, this fish that the cooking is just pouring hot water on it, that's enough of the cooking process that it can be considered a tavshil for your Eruv Tavshillin. My lav ein lo shir. Oh, excuse me. Tchilaso v'sofo ein lo shir. For the beginning and the end, there is no amount that you need to have. So Rashi says tchilaso means when you're cooking at the beginning, and sofo, if you at the end, if you ate part of it or part of it got lost, there's no shear that you need. There's no specific amount that you need. My lav ein lo shear cloud. What do we mean? There's literally no amount. As long as there's a tiny amount left, that's okay. So the Gemara says lo ein lo shear lamalo. There's no maximum shear of how much you can make for Eruv Tavshillin. But yesh lo shear lamata. There's a minimum shear. It has to be a kizayis. A few more lines. Rav Huna said Rav. Eruv Tavshillin das. You need to have das for Eruv Tavshillin. So you have to know you're making it, or you can't make it for someone who doesn't know about it. Pshita das maniach mina. So it's so simple that the person who's leaving the Eruv Tavshillin needs to intend to make the Eruv Tavshillin. But the question is, das mi shanichu lo ba'ina no lo ba'ina? Can I make it for someone else and they don't know that I'm making it for them? Tashmad avod Shmuel me'er vakula the Narda. We can learn in the Beitza, the father of Shmuel made an Eruv Tavshillin for the whole city of Narda, all the Jews. Rabbi Abi, Rabbi Asi, Ma'arva Kulu Tiveria. Rabbi Abi and Rabbi Asi made an Eruv for the entire Tiveria. Machriz, Rabbi Abba Bar Idi, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi would announce on Yantif, Mishlei Nech Eruv Tavshillin Yavav Yismach Al Shali. Someone who didn't leave an Eruv Tavshillin can come and rely on mine. So even if someone didn't know I was making it for them, this seems to say that they could rely on it. Va'ad kama. So, well, let's say Tiveria on some directions ends at the lake, but in the other directions, where does Tiveria end? Where did Narda end? So the Gemara says, Atchum Amar Rab Nechumi Bar Zechariah Mishmei Dabai Atchum Shabbos. Anyone within the Tchum Shabbos is included is in that city. So if someone made it Eruv Tavshillin for the whole city, as long as they're within the Tchum Shabbos, they can rely on.
What if they extend?
It probably wouldn't count because the person who made it doesn't necessarily know anyone made or didn't make an Eruv. Interesting question. But he probably is not aware that someone made or didn't make an Eruv Tchum, so it probably would not count. But also, even But here's the thing. Even if you make a tchum, I mean, you make an erev tchumim, you can go further, but it still doesn't mean. But in regard to I'm making it for everyone in this city ends at the tchum. Someone extended it, they're allowed to go further, but that doesn't mean they're in the city anymore. In regard to tchum, they're in the city, but not in terms to I'm making it for everyone in the city. So if someone was outside the city, but within someone else's erev tchumen, I don't think it would count. The person who made it could have someone else eat it. Well, if someone could cook on the Eruv Tavshillin, they don't have to be the one to eat the Eruv Tavshillin. You're saying if someone ate the Eruv Tavshillin, do they have to eat it themselves? Probably not. They could ask someone to eat it for them. This is Eruv Tavshillin food, just eat it. Most poskim say it has to be eaten. Some poskim say it doesn't have to be eaten. Ravarin said he never saw his father eat the Eruv Tavshillin. Maybe. That might be true. Okay, we'll leave it here.